Welcome to Loud Cry Ministries and soundingtheloudcry.com. And in this Bible study today, we're going to go over clean and unclean foods. Now this Bible study will be solely based upon Leviticus chapter 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 14. Because in Matthew chapter 5, Messiah plainly stated that the Torah and the prophets were never done away with. Therefore, reducing the argument needed for Genesis, where that many state that they want to use from Genesis that all foods may be consumed, or from construed statements from Acts. Therefore, with that stated, let's begin this study now in Leviticus chapter 11. In Leviticus chapter 11, it is written, "And Yahweh spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, saying to them, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, These are the living creatures which you do eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Whatever has a split hoof, completely divided, chewing the cud among the beasts that you do eat. Only these you do not eat among those that chew the cud, or those that have a split hoof. The camel, because it chews the cud, but does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. And the rabbit, because it chews the cud, but does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. And the hare, because it chews the cud, but does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. And the pig, though it has a split hoof, completely divided, yet does not chew the cud, it is unclean to you. Their flesh you do not eat, their carcasses you do not touch, they are unclean to you. But these you do eat of all that are in the waters. Anyone that has fins and scales in the waters, in the seas or in the rivers, that you do eat. But all that have not fins and scales in the seas and in the rivers, all that move in the waters, or any living creature which is in the waters, they are an abomination to you. They are an abomination to you. Of their flesh you do not eat, and their carcasses you abominate. And all that have not fins or scales in the waters is an abomination to you. And these you do abominate among the birds. They are not eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle and the vulture and the black vulture and the hawk and the falcon after its kind, every raven after its kind, and the ostrich and the nighthawk and the seagull and the hawk after its kind, and the little owl and the fisher owl and the great owl and the white owl and the pelican and the carrion vulture, and the stork and the heron after its kind, and the hoopoe and the bat, all flying insects that creep on all fours is an abomination to you. Only these you do eat of every flying insect that creeps on all fours, those which have jointed legs above their feet, with which to leap on the earth. These of them you do eat, the locust after its kind, and the destroying locust after its kind, and the cricket after its kind, and the grasshopper after its kind. But all other flying insects which have 4 feet is an abomination to you. And by these you are made unclean. Anyone touching the carcass of them, any of them, is unclean until evening. And anyone picking up part of the carcasses of any of them has to wash his garments, and shall be unclean until evening. Every beast that has split hoof, not completely divided, or does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. Anyone who touches their carcass is unclean, and whatever goes on its paws among all the creatures that go on all fours, those are unclean to you. Anyone who touches their carcass is unclean until evening, and he who picks up their carcass has to wash his garments, and shall be unclean until evening. They are unclean to you. And these are unclean to you among the creeping creatures that creep on the earth, the mole and the mouse and the tortoise after its kind, and the gecko and the land crocodile and the sand crocodile and the sand lizard and the chameleon. These are unclean among all that creep. Anyone who touches them when they are dead becomes unclean until evening. And whatever any of them in its dead state falls upon becomes unclean, whether it is any wooden object or garment or skin or sack, any object which its work is done, it is put in water, and it shall be unclean until evening. Then it shall be clean. Any earthen vessel into which any of them falls, whatever is in it, becomes unclean, and you break it. Any of the food which might be eaten on which water comes becomes unclean, and any drink that might be drunk from it becomes unclean. And on whatever their carcass falls becomes unclean. In an oven or cooking range it is broken down. They are unclean, and are unclean to you. But a fountain or a well, a collection of water, it is clean, but whatever touches their carcass is unclean. And when their carcass falls on any planting seed which is to be sown, it is clean. But when any water is put on the seed, and any part of any such carcass falls on it, it is unclean to you. And when any of these beasts which are yours for food dies, he who touches its carcass becomes unclean until evening. And he who eats of its carcass has to wash his garment, and shall be unclean until evening. And he who picks up its carcass has to wash his garment, and shall be unclean until evening. And every creeping creature that creeps on the earth is an abomination. It is not eaten. Whatever crawls on his stomach, whatever goes on all fours, and whatever has many feet among all creeping creatures that creep on the earth, these you do not eat, for they are an abomination. Do not make yourselves abominable with any creeping creature that creeps, and do not make yourselves unclean with them, lest you be defiled by them. For I am Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall kadosh yourselves, and you shall be kadosh, for I am kadosh. And do not defile yourself with any creeping creature that creeps on the earth, for I am Yahweh, who is bringing you out of the land of Mitzrayim to be your Elohim, and you shall be kadosh, for I am kadosh. This is the Torah of the beast and the birds and every living creature that moves in the waters, and of every creature that creeps on the earth, to make a distinction between the clean and unclean, and between the living creature that is eaten and the living creature that is not eaten. Here we see written in Leviticus chapter 11 a detailed list of things to eat and things to not eat. It is very, very laid out where that no one has any questions or should have any questions. Yet most of the things that are listed unclean in the scripture, most people eat every day. Not only that, but the food that is processed for us to eat contains unclean things from unclean animals. And not only that, now genetically modified food. So we have to be very careful of what we eat. Not only that, so that no questions would be asked, Deuteronomy chapter 14 is an exact overlay of pretty much exactly what Leviticus chapter 11 states. So I'm going to read that and then close with a few final notes. We now move to Deuteronomy chapter 14. Do not eat whatever is abominable. These are the living creatures which you do eat: ox, sheep, and goat, deer, and gazelle, and roebuck, and wild goat, and mountain goat, and antelope, and mountain sheep, and every beast that has a split hoof divided in two, chewing the cud among the beasts you do eat. But of those chewing the cud, or those having a split hoof completely divided, you do not eat, such as these: the camel, and the hare, and the rabbit, for they chew the cud, but do not have a split hoof, they are unclean to you. And the pig is unclean for you, because it has a split hoof, but does not chew the cud. You do not eat their flesh, or touch their dead carcasses. These you do eat of all that are in the waters. All that have fins and scales you do eat. And whatever does not have fins and scales you do not eat, it is unclean for you. And any clean bird you do eat, but these you do not eat: the eagle, and the vulture, and the black vulture, and the red kite, and the falcon, and the buzzard after their kinds, and every raven after its kind, and the ostrich, and the nighthawk, and the seagull, and the hawk after their kinds: the little owl, and the great owl, and the white owl, and the pelican, and the carrion vulture, and the fisher owl, and the stork, and the heron after its kind, and the hopi, and the bat. And every creeping creature that flies is unclean for you. They are not eaten. Any clean bird you do eat. Do not eat whatever dies of itself. Give it to the stranger who is within your gates to eat it, or sell it to a foreigner, for you are Kodesh people to Yahweh your Elohim. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. And there is the conclusion of Deuteronomy chapter 14, what it states on clean and unclean foods. It is very important that we understand that what we eat not only affects us spiritually, but affects us physically. Many of the health conditions that are abounding in our society today are due to the fact of eating unclean foods. Now, there are other factors that play in, such as the contamination that the governments are putting into our food and allowing into our food, and not only that, putting in our airways and other sources. But the main point that be brought forth from this scripture study is that we need to dedicate ourselves and kadosh ourselves, not only by our actions, but what we eat too, as this will affect the health of our body and also affect the service that we can give to Master Yahweh. With that said, I hope this study is a blessing to you, and until we see you again here at Loud Cry Ministries, we hope you have a most blessed day in Yahushua name.